Today we're going to be discussing the top 5 most influential morphs in ball pythons right now. Not of all time, not in the future like we just recently did, but right now, in the present. Starting at number 5 would be Hypo, otherwise known as Ghost. Although that nickname is starting to go out the door with the rise of the desert ghost gene. The Hypo has long been described to me as a gene that makes your snake look like it always is in shed. And I think it is sadly overlooked until maybe recently. If you go on Morph Market right now and sort by most available, Hypo is actually number 3. That doesn't mean much because it means it's been around for a long time, but we're starting to find new ways to appreciate and love this gene, especially as other genetics come into the picture. And what you're going to find here about influential genes is that if that gene is consistently being talked about and paired with new up and coming genes, then you have a winner, because people think about that gene all the time. They say, I can't wait to see it with this. Then you have a self-driving machine, and Hypo is no stranger to that. As I said, a lot of people will describe Hypo as a gene that always makes your snake look like it's in shed, but that couldn't be really further from the truth in my opinion. You look at this snake does not look like it's in shed. It looks bright. It looks like it's glowing. A lot of times people used to say it looks ghostly, and that is where the more proper name, in my opinion, belonged. But there's a whole naming situation fiasco with that. Desert Ghost really did a number on the naming thing. But if you do hear that, try not to get confused, because ironically putting Hypo and Desert Ghost together is a very popular thing because it really brightens that snake up like a light. And if it kept its old nickname, it would be a Desert Ghost Ghost. Needless to say, the single gene animal is cool, but you can start to see maybe why people might just overlook it. It does brighten it. It is very, very nice and cool, but it doesn't completely blow you away. Where Hypo shines is what it does with combinations. And speaking of combinations, first up is exactly what I was just talking about, and that is a Hypo Desert Ghost Leopard Clown here. I wish there was more pictures of this, but you start to see what I'm talking about here. Looking at this snake, it's easy to just give a quick glance and say, oh, well, it looks like it's in shed, but it does not. It quite literally looks like it's a beam of light. It doesn't look like it exists on the same plane of existence of us. Its contrast levels have grown so intense that yes, it has contrast in and of itself, but now it contrasts with the environment around it, with reality. And you hear me talk about contrast and how much I love it. This takes it to a whole nother level. Obviously, a triple recessive is not easy to make, but you start to see the insane potential of something like this, especially when compared with Desert Ghost. And the cool thing about it is it brings you to the brink of being washed out, but it's not. Another Desert Ghost Hypo, again, just looks like these snakes are radiating light. They are bright. They don't look like they're in shed. It almost blends into the white background on this photo. It almost looks like something that maybe you should contrast this with a black background instead of white. This one here is just absolutely bonkers to me, this chocolate inchy Hypo Desert Ghost. The purples that are coming in on this animal with the contrasting very nice bright yellows, and yet subtle bleeding of the pattern of yellow into the purples, but not overpowering it. Zebra, another up and coming morph that it just pairs so incredibly well with, because Zebra is very nice and clean and bright. They go very well together. And if you need further proof that this is an awesome gene, remember that as of maybe a year and a half ago, everybody thought that the super mandarins were this awesome, beautiful animal, but the super mandarins that we were seeing were not just super mandarins. They were super mandarin hypos. Definitely a insane gene, influential gene to say the least. But it is so good for enhancing the snake, and in such a way that just, again, it radiates light. At number 4 would be one that we just recently talked about, and that would be Sunset. Sunset might upset some people, but influential means that it's on everybody's tongues. But I would not say that Sunset has reached the level that it's become most influential of all time. But it is dominating a lot of the conversation, so much so that when you go to the Tinley, I have what I like to call the Sunset aisle, and it's right when you walk in the doors. If you just go straight, everything to your right is Sunset. With that said, you don't see them around a whole ton, but they are dominating a lot of the conversation. Sunset is a gene that, well, it meets the name of the sunset. It's very, very bright with these beautiful oranges just peeking up. The number one criticism on Sunset is that as they grow, they brown out. That sunset goes away, which I think is kind of appropriate, right? Sunset's not there forever. Eventually it goes away and it turns dark. With that said though, this is ball pythons, and who are we kidding? We aren't just settling at just the one gene here. We are working things into this to improve every single day. One thing that catches my eye right off the bat is this pastel fire lace sunset. lace is a brightening gene and enhancing gene, and I think it does very, very well to suit sunset. Now, I do also believe that laces can be subtle at points, but it does brighten this snake up. Hypo sunset, we just talked about, creates this glowing animal, but what I appreciate about it is that it still keeps those dark patterns. It keeps them in check because it itself is radiating and glowing, and it always is going to have this different look, but it's going to maintain control over the brownout to some extent. My favorite sunset I've ever seen of all time probably would be the lavender sunset that I saw at Tinley from Brad Boa. I would have expected that one to be what brightens the snake, I guess, and I don't know why, but I thought maybe that one would overpower the other, but they worked very well together. The pattern kind of gave way to the very nice colors, but this is a snake that's going to hold its colors very, very well. So as a first stepping stone of something to bring brightness to it, that suited it quite well. And one we showed off in our last video, look at the snake. Clown brings in these like cool looking whites that kind of just peek up sometimes that nobody really talks about, and it brightens the snake quite a bit. I mentioned this in our last video, but this snake is 150 some grams. It's approaching its adult weight. Some males don't get much bigger than 700 grams, and this one's already very close to that. It's a very cool, bright snake with lots of rusty oranges kicking into there. Very beautiful. Now, obviously, this price point is not going to be for most people, but someday the sunset clowns will keep getting worked, and someone will make a sunset clown with something else, and this snake right here won't be that price. You can drop some of them zeros off, but regardless of whether you love sunset or not, it is most definitely influential right now. If you look and pay attention to the ball python market, to people, someone's always got an opinion about sunset, and there's a lot of big breeders that are working it and moving forward with it, so you shouldn't expect it to go anywhere right now. At number 3 would be the ever popular Desert Ghost. And Desert Ghost has been incredibly popular for a while now. There was an absolute boom of this gene. I watched this gene drop in price for a single gene so quickly. It's still up there. Even by itself, you're finding males for around 175-ish to maybe 200. And obviously females go up from there. And again, I am sorting by lowest price first. And these are hets right here. This is not even a Desert Ghost, I don't think. And then you have your first Desert Ghost at 150. And a good big male there actually too. Desert Ghost by itself creates a very clean, bright animal. I've seen varying examples of this, but overall you always have an animal that's very clean. But it's very much a combination gene. Where it starts to shine is when you start to get anything into it. The very first ones ever created, I believe, might be Desert Ghost Pastels. And look at this. Pastel, the gene that browns out that everyone wants you to stay away from. That's amazing. Crisp, clean, creamy, beautiful, and bright. It's gorgeous. 2 genes, and it looks like that. So unbelievably beautiful. This is a pretty good price for a pet too, in my opinion, if you just want something that's gonna be nice and bright and beautiful. And quite frankly, it'll be very similar to this, not exactly like this, its whole life. It's all about the combos when it comes to Desert Ghost. That is why it's so influential. Again, it's another gene that people are saying, let's get this into everything. I already showed you a snake with the Hypo Desert Ghost Leopard Clown male here. But look at something like this Pastel Desert Ghost Clown Pied. It's a triple recessive right off the bat with a het G-stripe on top of it, and then the pastel. But holy cow, is this thing bright. But not washed out. Not completely. Obviously, you start to lose some of this crazy dark pattern, but it's dark. That's the thing, is that it doesn't just brighten the snake, it accentuates what colors you do get. So when you get a black, you get a jet black. There was a Desert Ghost Xanthic Clown that Canova brought to one of the shows, and I'm not the hugest Xanthic fan because I think that this gray and black kind of browns out pretty quickly. Not all Xanthics are created equal, but I do appreciate them when they're done right, and there's a lot of people who do them very right. When you get something like Xanthic which browns it out, it really cleans it up and prevents that. Spot nose is always amazing, one of my absolute favorite genetics. So when you get the spot nose in here, I mean, look at that, this perfect little, almost looks like a bullet hole in the head that's been bleeding, but it's so clean throughout the rest of the snake. It's nice creamy colors that it brings in. When you start to talk about the dark patterns on the animal, it maintains those. It does not lighten the dark patterns. That's where it differs from Hypo. I reaped praise on Hypo earlier, and I do love Hypo, but there's a time and a place for different flavors. And Hypo typically will lighten the darker pattern. It still keeps that contrast. It's very interesting because it's perfect lightening, so you can tell it's dark, but Desert Ghost accentuates. It's an enhancing gene. These darks remain jet black. They don't start to bleed as they grow, hardly even, if at all. Again, a perfect example of that would be that Xanthic I was just mentioning. And there's been other examples of these being made from other people. As you can see in this example right here, how it brightens the animal and brings in these nice crisp oranges. It pairs very well with leopard. It is intense because, again, you have these nice clean contrasts of the white just peeking in there just to keep your attention, to show you and accentuate the other colors, because you have that perfect stark white. You have the very clean, beautiful, nothing bleeding into it orange. And then you have the jet black. The only bleeding that really even slightly occurs on this picture that I can see is in the head. Other than that, perfection. And it's why Desert Ghost is so incredibly popular. It's why it had such a boom for a long time there, to the point where everyone started working Desert Ghost. These are gorgeous snakes that are very influential. And at number 2 would be Pied. A safe bet, oldest time, one of the OG morphs that really took ball pythons and catapulted it to another level. When a new morph is discovered, one of the first genes that people come to and say, I need to get that into, that is Pied. I don't think there's a single show that I've ever been to that did not have a Pied. Pied brings in these crazy white blotches onto the animal, and it's always different. I have Pied here that are nearly all white, that have given birth to snakes that are nearly all pattern. It's so random, and what's so cool about it is it's not just the pattern of the ball python going away and giving way to this white peak and these white blotches. No, it jumbles these patterns into these little saddles, these crazy little lines, to the point where sometimes you're getting smiley faces and emojis and jack-o'-lanterns. It's so insanely cool. You could work just Pied and be happy as pie. Wow, that was corny as fuck. Just the single gene Pied is just so interesting and so different. You could have a whole table of just Pieds and they'd all be different. And that's what's so cool about them, because there's so much variety in just something that's just a single recessive. But naturally, we didn't stop there. There are so many examples of what Pied has done. Things like the Dreamsicle, the Lavender Pied, really brought these cool looking colors in there. Now, I don't quite work Dreamsicle yet. I do work the Candino Pieds, which are kind of similar and overlooked in my opinion, because they bring in a stronger, different kind of color of lavender than the Lavender Pieds. And it's cool and intense, and you can get different examples of that even in color. If you search for a genetic with Pieds, I mean, you probably are gonna find it. If it hasn't been worked, it's gonna get worked. I guarantee you. It works well with everything. A lot of the ones we already showed you are gonna have a lot of these genes in there, because it's impossible not to find them, and it's impossible not to talk about them. Here's a cool, unique one. This is a chimera or a paradox, but still very cool. And one thing to note is that I noticed that paradoxes seem to pop up more when it comes to Pied specifically. I don't know why that is, but it seems to happen a lot in Pied and in albino genes. The most famous one of all time being Skittles, easily. But you see here, you get even more crazy things all the time from these. Okay, this one's really cool. I didn't see this last time. This is from Canova, a pastel sunset Pied that happens to also be het clown. This gives me monsoon vibes. You get these cool bright oranges creeping up. You get these often in Pied, just randomly. Even a regular Pied will have these bright oranges surrounding the pattern. It's so cool and intense, but the pattern on the back is just blown up. Just intense, just super cool. Almost flirts between this like dirty type pattern, almost like it's trying to break out and overtake the snake. It kind of has some bleed over in its Pied pattern right here too. But you don't normally see that a lot. Almost like paradoxy, just right there. But you see the white, so very, very cool. One of the most unique ones I've ever seen. Or take something like this Enchi Yellow Belly Lace Clown Pied. Just an absolutely gorgeous girl here. The colors and patterns are perfect because it kind of bleeds. It almost like it dances between clean and almost dirty. Just another form of contrast, if that makes any sense, because you are seeing different breaks in the pattern. You have this granulation of the pattern as well, and that kind of creates this dirty type look, but the contrast with the white brings it in and just really kind of almost tricks your eye into seeing these different colors in a different way, which is really what Pied's main strength is that it's able to call your attention when these whites come in. It doesn't need to be much. In fact, this level of white, this is to me a perfect Pied. I like the whites come in, but I prefer it to be more patterny. I think that it serves it well enough to have these crazy patterns and these crazy colors, and it shows itself just enough to break it up and remind you the color palette that you're seeing before your eyes. Kind of like a cleanser in a way. Just to combine a few morphs here, you can actually see the Desert Ghost Clown Pied, just how absolutely beautiful something like this is. It's a reason why it continually gets brought in as a go-to morph, and easily could have been number one. And on that note, our number one is staring at us right now as well, and that would be Clown. Clown, I would say, is the most influential right now, and quite possibly of all time, but we'll get to that another time. I said Pied gets brought to everything. Clown takes it to another level. It hasn't been around as long, but everyone is always talking about Clown. They're always wanting to put Clown into everything. And again, while this is by no means a perfect representation of what the most influential morph, it is over 1,000 more than Pieball. They're everywhere, but yet they still have an absolutely insane demand. Regular clowns, it doesn't matter. I fly off my table, and clown combinations are where it is all at. We have gotten such gems like the Pompeii, which lives up to the name in that it looks like the magma from Mount Vesuvius. It is intense, it is beautiful. We have what we like to joke is a -1 Pompeii. She's basically only missing spot nose, so you know where my mind's going on this. She is absolutely gorgeous, easily my favorite looking clown. Other morphs like the Kraken, also named properly, the mystical Kraken, have kind of been suction cupping on the side of this animal. Very similar kind of dark patterns, and where Clown is shining so beautifully, similar to how Pied works too, but even more so, is that it can both work in the bright and the dark side of the gene, or it can do both of them together at once and contrast that like no other can. You can put Clown to, I think, everything. Desert Ghost works with Clown. Pied works with Clown. Sunset works with Clown. Monsoon, with all of that crazy pattern, at least does something to the head. My favorite monarch of all time is a monarch spot nose clown. Basically everything works with Clown. It is the staple go-to gene in this hobby. And Pompeii probably is easily the most popular morph of Clown right now, I'd say. Just looking really quick, I found this Coral Glow Pompeii I thought I'd show attention to. Wow, it took the Pompeii and added even more oomph to it. Almost looks like it's hypo, ironically. But you start to get these more intense oranges, and it brings in that lavender that you really didn't get before. Just a different flavor of something that's already so awesome. Again, it just reminds me of like hypo. I'm surprised it isn't. It wasn't even in the pairing. And one thing about Clown is that it's one of the only morphs that affects the head. It creates a head stamp as well, and it erases the eye stripes. Not too many genes can do this. Spot nose can affect the head, and can affect the head in some cases, especially when you get super inchy. But Clown always gives you a crazy head with a head stamp. It gives a lot of unique, cool looks to it. Gives the snakes some cool stuff around their eyes rather than just the eye stripes that they normally have. And it also captures contrast very well, especially when combined with even the simplest of morphs. Again, like I said, it brings in darks and lights very well together, like what you're seeing here. You've got like a triple contrast here because you have a bright yellow, like a neon glow yellow. You have these dark patterns, but then inside the dark pattern, it has pixelated and crept in this almost like white undertone to it, and really makes it almost seem like it's hollow, like you're seeing into the snake. It's crazy, and Clown is going to remain on top for everything. It's the go-to gene. It hasn't changed in a while, and I don't know if it's going to change anytime soon. When people say something is the new Clown, they're wrong, because Clown is the new Clown, and it's going to remain the new Clown, and that is why it's #1. Tell us what you think. Did we miss anything in your opinion? If you like this video, you can actually check out our top 5 up and coming recessive morphs right here.